Let's talk about some basic techniques for debugging Python programs. As you start to write code, you're going to make mistakes, and figuring out how to recover from those mistakes is a skill that will take some time to develop. So to do that, again, I have this program that we wrote in the last part for finding out when a next bus was going to come by my office. And normally when that program runs, okay, you type something like Python 3 next bus 22 14 787 and you get a result back. If there's a mistake in the program, what is going to happen is the program is going to crash. So just to illustrate that, let me make a mistake in the program. I'm going to change a name in the program and run it again. If I run that with a mistake in it, Python will crash and it will generate a traceback message. Reading these traceback messages, the most essential part of it is that the very last line is actually what is wrong with your program. So if you're looking at the error message and you're saying, I wonder why that's not working, the very last line is what's wrong. Okay, it comes back and says attribute error, there's no attribute txt. And then right above that, it's showing a line of code from my program. For something like that, it might be as simple as like just a typo in a name. That's the mistake that I made as I changed the name. You can fix it by fixing the program. You might have to consult the help or the documentation to do that, but it's like a simple programming mistake that has taken place there. Other kinds of errors are maybe a little bit more daunting. For example, let's say I went to this program and I made a mistake in the URL. Let's say I made a typo in that, and then I ran the program with that mistake. What's going to happen here is you're going to get a much larger error message. I mean, if you look at the error message, it goes on for line after line after line. It's very easy to look at that and become very intimidated. For something like that, you have to carefully look at the message that's being generated. First of all, the last line, again, this is what is wrong with the program. It comes back and it says HTTP error 404 not found. And then what it's doing is it's showing a whole bunch of code in libraries that is not my program. Okay, these lines of code that it's showing, these are not part of my next bus program. And the way to maybe interpret that is that maybe I've given some bad input to a function. I gave it like bad input, it went through a whole chain of operations and then crashed. And so for something like that, I have to look at my program and look at the inputs to maybe the URL open function. The fact that this is reporting a 404 is telling me that the URL is bad. It's going to a non-existent URL. So that should give me some clue about how to fix that. By changing it back, I can get the program to work again. Now, some other programming techniques that I think are worth knowing about. Let's go back to the original crash here where I had a name problem like that. One thing that is actually very useful to do is to run Python with the -i option. You can say, well, what does that do? What that does is it will run the program and then drop you into Python's interactive prompt afterwards. This can be a very useful way to kind of poke around and look at what is happening. Like I can look at the data that came back. I can look at this document that's in the program. I could maybe try different experiments with it to see maybe I screwed something up somewhere. I mean, essentially what can happen is your program can crash and then you can come back afterwards and poke around at it. That's one useful technique for debugging, is to know about the Python -i option. Some other techniques for debugging, obviously you can do print statements, like printing the text out here. That works fine for debugging as well. I mean, I can put a print statement anywhere I want and see what is happening here. Like if I wanted to see the response of that request, I could put a print statement in there and just view what happens. Okay, so now it's showing me the response. Another thing that may be useful is the Python debugger. Let me go back to my original error there. If your program crashes and you are using this -i option, one thing that you could do is load the debugger. So there is this module PDB that you can load. And if you do pdb.pm, which is short for postmortem, it's kind of a weird thing to type, it will take you into the code, show you the line of code where it's failed, and then you can do poking around. You can do print statements from here. You can get program listings to sort of find out kind of surrounding context and so forth. Another thing that I'll mention, since it involves the debugger, sometimes you will see people launching the debugger in the code itself by putting this statement in here. I'll just put a comment next to it, launch the debugger. That is kind of like a manual breakpoint. Wouldn't say it comes up super common, but if you have a large program and you're just completely lost about what is happening, you might put that in the program. And what will happen is when you run the program, it will hit that point and then go straight into the debugger. At that point, you can poke around. You can maybe single step through the code if you want. You can make it, run afterwards and so forth. So these are all tools useful to know about for debugging. As you start to write larger programs, it'll be useful to be able to do that.